He owned half of Montreal and the silence of everyone who worked in it. Nadia Kowalski... Wait, no. She belonged to a different story. The woman who walked into the Vieux-Port brasserie that Tuesday morning carrying a tote bag stuffed with ledger printouts and a travel mug that had seen better decades was named Petra Solis. 29 years old, Senior Accounts Reconciliation Specialist for Meridian Hospitality Group, which was a very long title for a job that boiled down to this. She found the numbers that didn't add up, and she fixed them before anyone important noticed they were broken. She had been doing this for 6 years. She was very good at it. Nobody knew her name. That was by design. Petra had learned early, sometime around the age of 14, when the boys in her class had started ranking the girls out loud at lunch, that being invisible was a kind of armor. She wore it well. Dark blazer, dark slacks, hair pulled back into something that wasn't quite a bun and wasn't quite a twist. She moved through rooms like weather, present, unnoticed, gone. The brasserie was one of 12 properties on her quarterly audit rotation. It was also, though she had not been told this directly, the primary cash laundering front for the Devereux syndicate. A fact she had deduced on her own approximately 4 months ago from a recurring discrepancy in the linen service invoices. She had flagged nothing. She had told no one. She had simply begun keeping a second copy of every document she touched. Stored on an encrypted drive she kept in the inside pocket of the tote bag, against her ribs, where she could feel its weight. She was not brave. She wanted to be clear about that, in her own mind. She was terrified. She just hadn't figured out what to do about it yet. The morning shift manager, a jittery man named Cloutier, met her at the service entrance and walked her to the back office without making eye contact. Standard. She sat up at the corner desk, spread her materials, opened her laptop, and got to work. She had been there for 47 minutes when the front door opened and the entire staff went quiet. She heard it from the back office, not a sound so much as the absence of one, the way a room full of people stops breathing at exactly the same moment. She didn't look up from her spreadsheet. She heard the footsteps, though, even through the office wall, unhurried, deliberate, the kind of steps that have never once moved out of someone else's way. The door to the back office opened without a knock. Julien Danavereux stood in the doorway. Petra had seen photographs. The photographs had not done the problem justice. He was somewhere north of 40, built like a man who had once done serious physical work and had never quite stopped. Dark hair, a few threads of silver at the temples, a suit that cost more than her monthly rent. She could tell by the way the shoulders sat, perfectly still even as he moved. His eyes were a shade of grey that didn't seem to have a name in any language she spoke, and they moved across the back office with the flat, assessing patience of someone cataloguing everything they saw and filing it away for future reference. They landed on her. She looked back down at her spreadsheet. "Who are you?" he said. His French was Quebecois, but his English, when he switched to it a moment later, was flawless, the kind of flawless that came from decades of choosing precisely which language would unsettle a person most. "Petra Solis," she said without looking up, "Accounts Reconciliation. I'm here for the quarterly." A pause. "I wasn't told anyone would be here. Cloutier has the scheduling memo. You're welcome to check with him." Another pause. Longer this time. She could feel him looking at her. She had a very specific and well-developed ability to feel when a man was looking at her body and deciding what to say about it. It was a skill she had acquired the same way she'd acquired most of her skills, through repeated unwilling practice. She kept her eyes on her screen. "You're comfortable," Julien Devereux said, "sitting in my office, telling me to check with my own staff." "It's a shared workspace," Petra said. "Cloutier uses it Monday through Friday. Per the property records, it's listed as administrative common area. But if you need the desk, I can move to the bar. Better light over there anyway," she began, calmly, to stack her papers. "Stop." She stopped. Not because she was afraid, but because something in his voice had shifted, not louder, not angrier, but different, like a lock clicking, into place. She looked up. He was studying her with an expression she couldn't read. Not amusement exactly, not irritation, something more careful than either of those things. "You didn't flinch," he said. "Should I have?" "Most people do." Petra tilted her head. "Most people probably don't have 17 vendor discrepancies to get through before noon. I'm a little focused." Something moved at the corner of his mouth. It wasn't a smile. It was the distant relative of a smile, seen from across a very large room. He stepped inside, pulled out the chair across from her, and sat down. She had not expected that. "Show me," he said. She blinked. "I beg your pardon?" "The discrepancies." He nodded toward her laptop. "Show me. These are preliminary audit documents for Meridian Corporate. They're not. Show me." She held his gaze a moment that lasted approximately 3 years. Then she turned the laptop to face him and pulled up the linen service ledger. He leaned forward. His forearms rested on the desk. He read, actually read, not skimmed, not performed reading, for a full 90 seconds. Then he looked up. "This is wrong," he said. "I know. That's why I'm here. This is wrong in a specific way." "Yes." "You know what that specific way is." It wasn't a question. She understood that. She also understood, with a clarity that felt like cold water running down her back, that the next thing she said was going to matter in a way that her next words very rarely mattered. "I know that someone has been invoicing for 340 units of commercial linen service per week," she said carefully, "for a property that seats 80 covers at maximum capacity and has no function room. I know that 340 units is a number that would only make sense if this location were running a secondary operation, and I know that flagging that discrepancy to my corporate supervisor would trigger an audit referral to CRA within 72 hours, which would be unfortunate for several parties." Silence. "I haven't flagged it," she added. Julianne Devereux was very still. She had noticed, in the past 3 minutes, that stillness was his default state, not the stillness of someone waiting, but the stillness of something predatory and patient, accustomed to letting the world move around it while it decided what to do. "Why not?" he said. "Because I have 17 other discrepancies to sort through," she said, "and I prefer to understand the full picture before I make any decisions. A beat. And have you understood the full picture?" "I've understood enough of it." He sat back, looked at her, really looked at her, in a way that was different from before. Before had been assessment. This was something else, something she didn't have a word for. "You're not afraid of me," he said. Petra thought about lying. She was good at lying, had to be in this work, in this world, in this body that people made assumptions about before she opened her mouth. But something made her tell the truth instead. "I'm extremely afraid of you," she said. "I'm just also very good at my job, and my job requires a certain baseline of composure." This time it was a smile, small, brief, like a door opening an inch and then closing again, but real. "Petra Solis," he said, as though filing the name. "Julianne Devereux," she said back, as though she hadn't known it for 4 months. He stood, straightened his jacket with one small, precise motion. "Finish your audit," he said. "All 17 discrepancies. When you're done, I want a copy, not to Meridian, to me." "That would be a conflict of, to me," he said again. He walked to the door, paused with one hand on the frame. "Cloutier will have lunch sent in," he said. "The kitchen here is actually good. Don't let them tell you otherwise." And then he was gone. Petra stared at her spreadsheet for a long moment. Then she reached into her tote bag, pressed her hand against the encrypted drive sitting against her ribs, and exhaled very slowly. She had 17 discrepancies to document. She got back to work. The copy she delivered to him 3 days later, through a method he had arranged that she preferred not to examine too closely, was complete, thorough, annotated. It identified not only the linen service irregularities, but 4 additional patterns she had noticed in the payroll structure. two in the supply chain invoicing, and one extremely elegant piece of misdirection in the property depreciation filings that she had actually, privately, admired for its craftsmanship. She included a note at the end, in the same clean accountant's font as the rest of the document. The depreciation structure on pages 34-37 is quite good. Whoever designed it understood that auditors look for what's wrong, not what's missing. You may want to consider whether they're adequately compensated. She did not hear from him for 11 days. Then a package arrived at her apartment. Not her office. Her apartment, which told her things she chose not to dwell on, containing a single bottle of very good Bordeaux and a card that read, in neat handwriting, "They got a raise." Jadis put the wine on the shelf and didn't open it. She thought about it every day for 2 weeks. He appeared at the brasserie and again on a Thursday. 4 weeks after their first meeting, she was there for a follow-up reconciliation. She had worn the same dark blazer, the same dark slacks, her hair was up. She had a new travel mug, because the old one had finally given up. He came in at 11:15 and walked directly to the back office, as though he had known she would be there, which she was increasingly aware he probably had. He sat across from her again. "Lunch," he said. She looked up. "I'm sorry? Lunch. They're doing a duck confit today. It's good. I have 3 hours of work left. You can do 3 hours of work after lunch." He paused. "Or during, if you need to. I don't mind." She studied him. He was in a different suit today, charcoal rather than black, and he had the kind of resting face that would have looked cold on anyone else, but on him just looked like someone who had decided, long ago, that the world didn't deserve his smiling unless it earned it. "Why?" she said. "Why what? Why lunch? Why?" She gestured vaguely. "This. We are not friends, Mr. Devereux. I do accounting work for a hospitality group that manages one of your front companies. That's the entire extent of our relationship, and even that is probably not advisable given the circumstances." He looked at her for a moment. "The wine," he said. "You didn't open it." She blinked. "How would you?" She stopped. "Right. That's a violation of my privacy. It's an observation. It's surveillance. I keep an eye on things that matter to me." The words landed in the room differently than she'd expected them to. She felt them in her chest, which annoyed her. "I don't open gifts from people I don't know," she said carefully. It felt presumptuous to drink wine with a man I'd met once in a context that was, at best, legally ambiguous. And now you've met me twice. The ambiguity hasn't decreased. Something in his expression shifted. Not softened. Julianne Devereux did not soften. She was fairly certain it was structurally impossible, but changed, like a frequency adjusting. "I am not," he said, "accustomed to explaining myself. I'm not asking you to. And yet I find myself wanting to." He looked at the desk, then back at her. "You sat across from me 4 weeks ago with documentation that could have ended several careers, several lives, and several other things I won't enumerate in polite company. You were aware of what you were holding. I could see it in the way you were careful with your words. And you sat there and you were." He paused, chose a word with visible precision. "Composed, and honest about not being composed, which is a distinction most people can't manage." Petra said nothing. "I have not," he continued, "met many people who could do that. It's a coping mechanism," she said. "Not a virtue. So is courage, usually." She opened her mouth, closed it. "Lunch," he said again. The word was softer this time, not a command. Something closer to a request, which she suspected did not come naturally to him. She saved her spreadsheet, closed her laptop, and said, "If the duck is as good as you say, you're buying." The corner of his mouth moved. "Naturally," he said. The duck was extraordinary. She didn't tell him that, but she ate every bite, and she noticed he noticed, and she noticed him trying not to look like he was noticing, which was, inexplicably, given everything, a little bit wonderful. They talked about numbers. She hadn't expected that either. He understood fiscal architecture in a way that most of the corporate executives she worked with Genuinely did not. Not the surface of it, not the language of it, but the underlying logic, the way systems were designed to obscure, and the specific places where the cracks always appeared. "You enjoy this," he said at some point over coffee. "Not the auditing, the finding. The place where the numbers stop adding up and you have to figure out why." She considered denying it. "Yes," she said instead. "It's like..." She searched for the right word. "Most people in a room are paying attention to the conversation. I'm watching the door that nobody's looking at." He was quiet for a moment. "That's a lonely way to live." She blinked. It was not what she'd expected him to say. Coming from him, a man who walked into rooms and turned them silent, it landed with an unexpected weight. "You would know," she said quietly, and for just a moment, something moved behind his grey eyes that looked less like the undisputed head of Montreal's most powerful criminal syndicate, and more like a man who was very tired of eating lunch alone. "Yes," he said, "I would." 3 months passed. She did not stop working for Meridian. She did not stop doing his audits on the side. Unofficial, encrypted, delivered through channels she had been walked through with patient, careful instruction by a man named Arsenault, who had the manner of a retired librarian and was clearly, based on the gun she'd once glimpsed under his jacket, not one. She did not open the Bordeaux. She bought a second bottle, the same label, a different year, and put it next to the first one. She told herself she was being cautious, that she was simply gathering information, that she was a woman who made decisions carefully, who did not fling herself toward things simply because they were warm and paying attention to her. She had been flung at before. She knew what happened next. But Julien Devereux was not flinging. He was, she slowly understood, circling. The way he did everything, with patience and intention and the total absence of hurry. He called, sometimes. They had dinner once. He appeared at 2 more properties on her audit rotation, always with some plausible business reason, always staying longer than the business reason required. He never pushed. He never assumed. When she'd been short with him once, short and snappish and unreasonable, after a bad day and a worse morning, he'd simply waited until she'd finished and then said, "Do you want to tell me what actually happened? Or should we move on?" With a steadiness that had made her want to cry, which she absolutely had not done in front of him. She cried about it later, in her car, which she felt was a reasonable compromise. The night everything broke open was a Wednesday. Petra was at her kitchen table at 11:40 p.m., working through a quarterly close for a waterfront restaurant in the Plateau. When her phone lit up with a call from a number she recognized as one of Arsenault's rotation of burners, she answered it. It wasn't Arsenault. Petra. Julien's voice was even, which told her immediately that it wasn't. "I need you to listen to me carefully." She set down her pen. "I'm listening. There's a situation at the brasserie. It's contained. I don't need your help with it." A pause, deliberate, freighted. "But there are approximately 40 minutes during which your Meridian access credentials may become very interesting to certain people, and I need you to lock them remotely and trigger a credential reset." Yes, she was already reaching for her second laptop. Done. 40 seconds. She pulled up the admin portal, ran the emergency credential rotation, confirmed the cascade lock across all 12 properties. Done. What else? That was. He stopped. That was faster than I expected. "I've had the emergency protocol memorized since March," she said. "I did it in my head one night when I couldn't sleep and realized it was a vulnerability." She paused. "Who's at the brasserie? That's not your Julien." A longer pause. She had learned over 3 months that his sources were a form of vocabulary. "Renaud's people," he said, and that was enough. She knew the name, knew what it meant, knew that Renaud's interest in the Devereux ledgers was not auditory. "Are you there?" she said. "I'm nearby. Are you hurt? No. Are you going to be?" A pause that lasted too long. "Julia." "There was a complication," he said. "It's being managed. Where are you, Petra?" Where are you? The address he gave her was 4 blocks from the brasserie, in a service alley off Rue Saint-Paul. She had her coat on before he finished saying it. She found him sitting against a loading dock wall, his jacket off, his shirt dark on one side in a way that had nothing to do with the fabric color. Arsenault was crouched beside him doing something efficient and unhappy-looking, with what appeared to be a first aid kit the size of a small suitcase. 2 other men stood at the alley entrance, facing out, not looking at her. Petra stopped, looked at Julian. He looked back at her with an expression she had never seen on him before, not pain. Pain he was clearly handling, with the same granite composure he handled everything else. Something else. Something that looked, in the amber light from the dock, almost like embarrassment. "You didn't need to come," he said. "You told me where you were." "I was," he paused. "It was information, not a request. You told me," she said again, "where you were." She crouched down across from Arsenault, who glanced at her sideways and moved to give her a better angle, which she took as an endorsement of her presence. The wound was a graze, deep, ugly, already packed and pressure-dressed, not life-threatening. She knew enough to assess that, and to feel the sharp, cold fear of the moment between not knowing and knowing unclench in her chest. "This needs a proper stitch job," she said. "It will get one," Arsenault said. "Within the hour?" "Within the hour," he confirmed, with the tone of someone who had done this before. She looked at Julian. He was watching her with that careful, unreadable attention he gave to things he was trying to understand. "You're pale," he said. "You're bleeding. I've bled before. Good for you." She sat back on her heels. Her hands were steady. She was very proud of her hands. "I'll wait with you. You don't have, Julian." She said his name the way she said it when he was being intentionally obtuse, which he was capable of, despite everything. "I will wait with you." He was quiet for a moment. Then he leaned his head back against the dock wall and closed his eyes. "The Bordeaux," he said. She blinked. "What? The first one? You should open it. It's a good year, better than the second one you bought." He didn't open his eyes. 2019. Vintage. "The tannins will be softening now. It's time." She stared at him. "You know about the second bottle," she said. "I know about most things." "That is—" She stopped. Decided that the list of things she had to say about his surveillance habits could wait until he was no longer bleeding in an alley. "Fine. We'll open it when you're not in a service alley." "When I'm not in a service alley," he agreed without opening his eyes, in the tone of a man making a note. He came to her apartment 12 days later. He was fully healed, or nearly. He moved the same as always, unhurried, deliberate, occupying space with the particular authority of someone who had never once apologized for taking up room in the world. He brought nothing. No flowers, no wine. He had sent the wine ahead 3 days earlier, along with a card that said, "Leave it on the counter." It should breathe first. Jay had left it on the counter. He sat across from her at her kitchen table, the same table she'd been working at the night. She'd heard his voice go carefully even on the phone. And she poured 2 glasses and set one in front of him, and kept one in her own hands, and they sat in the particular quiet of 2 people who have been talking around something for a long time and have arrived, finally, at the place where not saying it is no longer possible. "I'm not a good choice," he said, not apologetically. As a fact clearly stated, given with the same directness he gave everything. "I know what you are," she said. "Do you?" "I've read your books," she said dryly. "Literally. All 12 properties, 3 years of ledgers. I know more about the structure of your organization than most of your lieutenants." Something flickered in his eyes. Might have been alarm. Might have been something warmer than that. "That is," he said carefully, "either the most dangerous thing you've ever said to me or the most attractive," she offered. A pause. And then, not the small door-cracking thing she usually got from him, not the careful, restrained fraction of a smile, but an actual one, full and brief and real, and it changed his entire face, and she understood suddenly, with the clarity of a column of numbers finally balancing, exactly why she had never opened the first bottle of wine alone. "I was going to say reassuring," he said. "Right, but yes," he said, "also that." She raised her glass. He raised his. Outside, Montreal was dark and cold, and doing whatever Montreal did on a November night, a little beautiful, a little brutal, deeply itself. Inside, the wine was exactly what it was supposed to be, and Petra Solis, who had spent the better part of her adult life learning to be invisible, sat across the table from the most dangerous man in the city, and decided, quietly and deliberately, and without a single tremor in her hands, that she was done with that particular skill. She had found something worth being seen for, and he was looking at her like he had known it all along.